All right. Happy Labor Day, America, and welcome to What Are the Odds with Barnes and Baris. Barnes is going to be a little fashionably late. He's doing his best to get here. Things happen sometimes, especially on a day like today. So what we thought we had planned until he pops up here, where we're probably going to just take it in whatever direction, is to tell you a little bit about the history of Labor Day, since we really don't, at least not bare bones. You're going to get some kind of a narrative with it, but then decide how we can look at this to help us understand today, the events of today with the realignment and current political trends, all of that. And believe it or not, there is a lot of analogy going on here between the history of then and what is going on now. All right, so let's get into it. Don't forget, if you like the videos, to like them and share them far and wide. Like, share, like, share. My locals is right below. That's the best place to follow me, as always. peoplespundit.locals.com, and Robert's down when he gets on, but I'll just read it out to you. It's sportspicks.locals.com. All right, Robert, as you guys know, loves history. So do I. We're history nerds. Love it to the core. Micro history too. Micro. Detailed about specific parts of the country and nation. I'm going to try to keep this as macro as possible. Okay. All right. Let's paint a picture here. We're talking about the late 19th century and what we now know and we refer to as the Gilded Era. We had titans of industry all over the place. The Carnegies, the Rockefellers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And business is booming, folks. I mean, you have Rockefeller, which is a staunch difference from today. His central hub, of course, was the Midwest. He had pipelines going all through Ohio and areas like that. And wealth was much more distributed even during the Gilded Era than it is back then. And people would say, that's crazy. That's not true. It is true. The 16th and 17th Amendments would later consolidate power in and around Washington, D.C., and its power centers and its contract centers. And there are the top 10 counties in the country that are the most wealthy are all within certain areas that you may know. Obviously, you have the financial center in Wall Street, but that's not even it. You have areas like Loudoun County in Northern Virginia. And then other places, there are some in Colorado where there are heavy defense contracting neighborhoods and stuff like that. But for the most part, it isn't what it was back then. Now, it's not to say there weren't problems with workers. There was. And their wages, you could argue, that were not fair. And then, of course, they wanted unionization. So Labor Day obviously was harnessed for votes. The political activism of the day was harnessed for votes. And eventually we will get a holiday to recognize the grievances of these people. All right. But before we did, Labor Day was not a top-down thing, even though certain political entities wanted to do that, just that, harness it as a political movement and use it to win elections. But it wasn't established as one. But long before we had a federal holiday known as Labor Day, they were all these movements in the states, and some of them were hosting these parades and they were hosting these celebrations before we recognized it as a federal holiday. And the very first one, which shouldn't surprise anybody, all right, was actually the very first celebration of it was actually in New York City, all right, in 1882, September 5th, 1882. But before we get there, we had this battle among historians of who actually came up with the idea after there were all of these state and local recognitions. And it's kind of crazy because the guys are named the same damn name, so it makes it very difficult when you have unclear history like this. This is what we call the Battle of the Maguires. Maguire and Maguire, who founded Labor Day. It's a little confusing, I know. All right. It's not really clear to us, but there are two workers who can make a solid claim that they are the founder of Labor Day, that they claim that title. There are some records that show in 1882, Peter J. Maguire was the general secretary of the Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners and a co-founder of the American Federation of Labor, that he suggested putting aside or making a, quote, general holiday for the laboring classes, unquote, to basically recognize and honor those, quote, who from rude nature have delved and carved all the grandeur we behold. In other words, and I unquote, And you know what? I love that quote because it tells you certain things have not changed. All right. He says, who from their rude nature have delved and carved all the grandeur we behold. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about New York City and the buildings they put. This is deeply dangerous work. And I don't think we appreciate that, because we have so many protections now. The next time you hear Bernie Sanders bitch about a working wage, understand we live in the healthiest, or should be anyway, and richest time where even the poorest people have things like cell phones and basic safety on the job site. That was not the case for these guys. And they were thought to be by the ruling class as like the unwashed masses. They are rude, barbarians. We like to call them Americans. All right. And they are the ones whose from their labor, their sacrifice, even their deaths and their injuries, we got the grandeur that we behold, as he said. All right. But Peter Maguire isn't the only one who has this claim to this title, and that title did not go unchallenged. Many others believe that a machinist, also of the similar sounding name Maguire with an M-A, right, Matthew Maguire, founded the holiday. And there's been some more recent research that does seem to support Matthew Maguire's claim. All right. Later, the secretary of Local 344 of the International Association of Machinists in Paterson, New Jersey. There is evidence that he proposed a holiday in 1882 while serving as secretary of the Central Labor Union in New York. And this is interesting because I don't want to get into the Jersey Historical Society yet and what they say, but there is an interesting figure that's going to come into play here. Obviously, I mean, if you know basic history about Labor Day, you know where I'm going and who I'm getting to here. This is a big figure. A figure that does not get the credit that he deserves in history. He has a unique place, or he did until recently. He still does, but he has a unique place in history. And he himself represented a realignment. And he was the last of his kind, but we're not. Hold on, just bear with me for a second here, all right? But the bottom line is, actually, I mean, hell, we could get there. Sorry, Maguires, but it's basically over for you. Like I said, the first celebration of the official holiday was on September 5th in 1882 in New York City, but it did not become a nationally recognized holiday until this man, Grover Cleveland, signed it into law as a federal holiday in 1894. And again, this wasn't overnight. Excuse me. New York was the first state to introduce the bill. Of course, President Grover Cleveland would go on to be, after being mayor, he would go on to be the governor of New York. They would introduce a bill recognizing the holiday. There was an official celebration, as I just stated, in 1882. But then Oregon was the actual first to pass a law that recognized the name Labor Day on February 21st, 1887. And during 87, 4 more states would also follow Oregon's lead: Colorado, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York. And then they passed laws creating a, quote, as we know it, Labor Day holiday. So New York kind of kicked this off, right? And Grover Cleveland will be a very important figure in all of it. And then eventually he'll become president and he'll sign it into law, right? By the end of the decade, you had Connecticut, Nebraska, Pennsylvania. They all followed. By 1894, 23 more states had adopted the holiday. And on June 28th, 1894, Congress passed an act making the first Monday in September each year a legal holiday. And then you had this man later would obviously sign it. Okay, what is interesting about this guy? Grover Cleveland is what we now refer to as a bourbon Democrat. Okay. These, you have to understand, I mean, when you think about Democrats, some famous ones, right? Especially of the labor movement, right? It's not the way it is today, folks. You had some deeply labor progressive Republicans. Donald Trump did not come up with the expression America First by himself. Hell, Ronald Reagan even used it, but you will find it in history even before then, because there was an element in post-Reconstruction, the Republican Party, that believed that there was a danger of internationalism and that we had to protect the American worker and the American family, right? And also, by the way, American business, period, against, other industry. And of course, America had to be first on everything. right? Their products, their energy, innovation, everything. And there was nothing wrong with that. And in fact, there were other members of the opposing party that also still agreed with things like laissez-faire economics, right? Not that the government shouldn't be there to protect if, people needed protecting, folks, but for the most part, it really did come down to this guy being the end of his kind. All right. And it's kind of sad, actually, because this is when, how I'm trying to say this without insulting any Democrats who may be watching, this is when Democrats start to go off the rails. All right. After Grover Cleveland, we get into the heart of the progressive era, not progressive labor, right? Not the heart of the progressive era, which will lead to the worst two amendments ever ratified in the history of the country, which is the 16th and the 17th Amendments. Those are the end of the original design and the vesting in power in different areas of government and the sovereign voting body. So that is the moment where they in the name of one man and one vote and your own representation, it sounds really nice. That is when they killed the state's ability to defend themselves against a federal government, a large federal government. And by the way, your ability to not be taxed directly by the federal government. I had to laugh at somebody's comment on Twitter the other day. They did not have the power to tax you. It was not the role of the federal government to tax you as an individual. And they tried many times during the progressive era to directly tax you, even though they would also claim, with the other hand, to be a pro-worker, pro-labor party, right? And it got shot down. And I run over this history in a very old book that I wrote that you can read if you want, but it's very old, right? And wonky, and because it was based on an actual thesis, right? So the fact of the matter is, we get to that point in history, and there's some very contradictory positions held by this party. All right. Anyway, by that time, the Bourbon Democrat is gone. They're a thing of the past. And Grover Cleveland was an interesting figure because while he did believe in capitalism, I mean, how else to put it, he was also vehemently anti-corruption. He was what we now will later go on to say, kind of like anti-monopoly. He didn't like funny money. He was thrown out of office the first time, which is an area I want to go in. I'm going to paint a little bit of a parallel here, right? He was thrown out of office the first time for being almost too good, things were running very well under the first term, but he wasn't part of the club. Which reminds you of somebody else. Grover Cleveland has a very deep connection to this man. All right. And until Donald Trump was reelected again for a non-consecutive term in 2024, Grover Cleveland was the only president to do so. And that's because after they threw him out, they crashed the economy. They effed up foreign policy. They did everything. And the country begged him, please come back and fix this mess, which he did, by the way. He did. So this guy deserves way more credit than he gets. And he kind of reminds you of somebody else, doesn't he? So anyway, that's the short and curly of it there, folks. I'm going to bring in Robert Barnes, and we'll talk more about this. Robert, as soon as I figure out how to remove this damn image from the screen, bang, there we go. Happy Labor Day, brother. As always, we just ran through. We had a good one last year, too. How are you?
Good.
I just ran through brief history.
Like a barbecue and what have you? You had the what kind of grill setup do you have? You seem like a natural foodie, so I assume you have like serious grill.
Oh yes. So my favorite is the barrel smoker that I have, which is completely modified by this obscure website for foodies like me, where when you go out and even if you buy like an Oklahoma Joe, guys, at Lowe's, all right, you can go to this website, which I'll put in the chat, and you can juice this thing out. So I got a couple grills, but my favorite is that smoker, and I got it from Oklahoma Joe. You really probably can't get it anymore because it's like bigger than their commercial models they sell at Lowe's. but they made me these heat distribution plates for the bottom of them. So I have all of these customizations. When you buy a grill out and about, folks, you'll see like there's a bolt on one side if the grill's big, and there's a thermostat on the other. The biggest part about smoking, as anyone who smokes knows, is maintaining your temperatures, right? So you can't have these wild fluctuations while you're cooking a brisket or you're cooking ribs. So I had that kit installed. So I have the thermostat on both sides and the heat distribution plates that actually make it so heat is distributed correctly instead of it being so hot by the chimney and the box, instead of being throughout the smoker. And then I got a couple other little things on there that are just make the deal, Robert. The clamps, you cannot let the heat escape. You don't want that smoke to escape anything but the damn exhaust, So I have this strip, this high heat tolerant strip that really binds the lid closed when you close it, and it doesn't melt. And then you can clamp it as well. So I clamp it. So it's just like there's no smoke leaking out of my smoker, bro. It's so awesome. I know it's easy just to go to the pellets, Robert. I know it is, but it's like cheating. It's cheating to me. And all my smoker friends, they all are doing it. And I feel like pussies. You left me alone. But I get to pick my, different woods that I want for different meats. So yeah, it really is nothing more than an old school Oklahoma Joe that I've just really taken care of for years. And, I have some other ones. The egg, people have the egg. The egg's cool, but it's like not make a brisket in an egg. I dare you. You know what I mean? I try it.
Now, is that like Italian family tradition? What led to the food aficionado being able to, to be being interested in it, engaged in it, skilled at it?
Yeah, that's definitely grandma. Of course, grandma wasn't out there smoking briskets. I mean, you go out in your own direction. I still know her stuff, but even as a little kid, speaking of a Labor Day, would be a perfect example. We were the, folks, if you grew up in the tri-state area, you know what I'm talking about. Every kid is at everyone's house, right? Maybe somebody's got a splash pad out in the front on Labor Day. Maybe somebody has like this giant blow-up pool in the backyard or something, and you're all hanging out. Grandpa's grilling, grandma's in the house cooking. It was whatever people wanted. It was a great time. So, food keeps traditions and cultures alive, keeps families strong and tightly connected. By the way, you got some talent in your family too when it comes to that. I mean, amazing barbecue. Oh my God. Right.
Yeah.
So
my little sister, her husband, and his sister. Yeah, they have that old Southern style of cooking. I mean, on my side of the family, neither my mother nor my father could cook. So none of us except my little sister can cook. She's the sixth of the family. She's the only one that can cook. And none of the rest of us are any good. But I got nephews and nieces, they can all cook, and it seems like it's something that you grow up with around it young. Yeah. It's almost like it naturally acclimates.
Yeah, my wife, she's amazing too, but like her mother couldn't. My wife came with like the Italian side with my wife. Her mother was the young one, so maybe that's why. Like she was the little baby in the family, so maybe that's part of it, Robert. But when we moved in together for the first time, I cooked. Now she cooks, but I cooked. I remember the first meal I ever made her in our new apartment. And we had a small little apartment in Red Bank, New Jersey, because I worked in that time. I believe when I moved to Red Bank, I worked across the river. I worked in the city. And, it wasn't much, but it was nice because Red Bank's bougie. And I made her chicken cacciatore. And she was like, oh, this is going to work, and then she learned. And my dad, who always loved her, he taught her so much. But grandma did too before she passed because she knew her that long. But my dad with the chicken cutlets, which is like a special family recipe, it's a major pain in the ass. She now even surpasses him, and he'll be the first one to say it. Yeah, damn it, Laura, my chicken cutlets are dry. Make me some cutlets and ship them to me. Like he does. And she'll do it, she'll do it, so it's like food is the glue. It really is. Yeah, I think you're right about that. I was like, thinking about this actually today because I was brushing up as I was getting ready to tell the history of Labor Day. This is huge in New York still to this day. It was huge. At least when I was a kid, it was
Oh,
massive, massive, and you don't know until you get older, what the holiday's about and, what the history of it is. But, they had a very, close attachment to it because I guess of the role that New York played in getting this thing mainstream and moving this thing along. Grover Cleveland, who, by the way, couldn't get elected dog catcher in today's New York,
right. Yeah.
which is crazy, right? It's crazy.
Well, people forget New York City was for a long time, and New York State a swing state.
Yeah.
In their early 19th century, late 19th century politics.
Oops.
It was
My bad.
who could win on the streets of New York? Who could win on the? Phillips used to talk about that all the time. That's where he learned his understanding and interest of ethnic politics and of ancestral ties and of religious roles. He was an Irish Catholic from New York City, so that politics almost in your blood when you in New York. Because part of the what protects you, what extends your influence, what welcomes you to the country, what integrates you into the country. It's in this huge city of this true melting pot city. It's where political, I think Tom Brokaw described it well. A bunch of little villages connected to one another, whereas like LA is a bunch of little villages disconnected from one another. The sense of community is so much richer in New York than it is in places like LA. And Labor Day was all the holidays were like, the old feast. It has an old European vibe to it.
It does.
You get together, have a great feast, have a great sense of community, celebrate something, enjoy something, remember something, welcome something. And otherwise, it's very family and community driven. The Labor Day parades and floats and all the rest of that goes all the way back. It is, I think, a New York City phenomenon a little bit more than some of our other holidays.
Yeah, I think Tom Brokaw, I forgot about that. I think you did point that out. And it's like, it was that is so strong that you could literally uproot these communities and, maybe new generations that come up, the family is just getting too big for the house and they decide we'll move to a suburb in Jersey. That element was so strong that you could uproot massive numbers of people and with these different communities and different cities neighboring each other and just plop them right down in central New Jersey and they'll take the same form. It's really remarkable. It really is. I'm not sure how much longer, I guess that's the battle of our time though, isn't it, Robert? Like how much longer some of this stuff is able to be preserved, or even like my wife and I, we talk about it, even reconstituted, because the 80s and the 90s were such a damaging time for families, like the family unit. It's our responsibility is to try to build it back and get that sense of community and family back because the counterculture destroyed it. It almost not totally, but I don't think it's any accident that the biggest swing voting group in this country in 24 was an 80s baby. I did a whole damn episode with Hulk Hogan about of what he meant to that generation and what he symbolized. And, there's, the same thing goes here. The left, they want to take Labor Day and turn it into something that it never was. They do this with all of these things. They tried to harness this idea that there was, this, I'm not, because I want to be careful because I'm not trying to say, guys, that there wasn't poor labor conditions, and there wasn't a need for even unionization. Maybe there was another way. I don't know. If you had a better solution, let me know. But the Gilded Era and those periods, they certainly did have, it was a hard time to be a working man. And that doesn't mean, though, that you can take it and turn it all into collectivism, Robert. And what I'm saying? Like the Maguires statement, the quote that I just read, all he wanted people to understand, and especially the ruling class, of which, by the way, he dealt with constantly. All he wanted people to understand is, yeah, you like your boozy shit? Don't forget who actually puts it up. That's it. That's all. It was it. And then, of course, the left has to grab this stuff, take it to the extreme, exploit it. And we forget, and something I said earlier, I don't think a lot of people really knew or understood. And I actually detailed this in that book I was talking about with people. Wealth, it was much more distributed before the progressive era. Where did Rockefeller lay the pipe, Robert? He wasn't running it through Loudoun County. I mean, the Midwest was robust and rich, and there was a lot of opportunity there. Now, I mean, the 10 most wealthy counties, of which 7 of which are surround Washington, D.C. The other one surrounds Wall Street. And then there's one obscure one in Colorado, which is fueled by defense money. It was not like that back then, even though there certainly were issues like this that had to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, it was the peak of the industrial age. I mean, we went through really multiple waves of working class mass prosperity. The first one, really, you could argue, at least in the modern era, was the Jacksonian era. I mean, first you have the American Revolution, which totally changes our political structures and our perception of the legitimacy of political structures going forward. Then it said, power is rooted in the individual, power is rooted in you as a creation of God, your traditions, your community, your sense of history. That's what I think like New York City kind of represents in ways LA doesn't. And in the context of these kind of holidays, is that you have these places that are rooted in a place. Whether you're talking about Kevin Phillips, Edmund Burke, Christopher Lash, anybody along those lines. In modern age, Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, that when they're talking about what conservatism is, it's things like Labor Day celebrations. That even though it's labor that's being celebrated and that's perceived as a left, the political tradition, it's in fact a very conservative political tradition writ large. The AFL, when it started, American Federation of Labor, was very much considered the more conservative labor union. It was because it wanted to respect tradition, it respect seniority, respect continuation, respect history. These are things that sort of true conservatives celebrate that fit very easily within a Labor Day celebration.
Yeah.
This affiliation and association between corporatism and liberalism really is a more of a modern phenomenon. But definitely it is fair to conclude that corporatism and conservatism don't go well together historically. That if you're out to conserve something, you're not out to radically remake it in the name of the free market, as if the free market is some sort of goal of its own, independent, separate from a community of church and tradition and history and family and ancestry and geography. And that's what these kind of holidays remind us, is the little c conservatism of American politics and way of life in ways that might seem counterintuitive to those just looking at it from a glance.
Yeah, I don't know if it's not the Republican Party, then I don't know where something like Labor Day even fits anymore. I really don't. And, for people who think, oh, that's ridiculous, everybody knows the Democrats are the party of the working man. Well, I think you need to look at Wall Street donations in the last 3 presidential election cycles. That's just not true anymore. And there are these old school kind of conservatives.
Men voted for Trump.
Absolutely. I mean, this is ridiculous at this point that we're even having this. Like, it's not a debate. That's why you and I don't really think anybody else, there's nobody off the top of my head, made such a big deal off of talking about parts of Wisconsin, parts of Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. I mean, it's the birthplace of progressive labor. And why does Donald Trump do so much better in those counties, especially the Northwestern 3? Why does he do so much better in those counties than traditional Republicans? And then you have these, I saw Tom Bevan from Real Clear Politics earlier this morning. First thing in the morning, I think he posted. And he said, that the Bulwark is indistinguishable from The Nation. Like, they're both the same kind of magazines, and he's got the front pages of each of them next to each other, and they're both ridiculous, right? And the point is, I guess, like, those old school conservatives are the ones who used to paint the Republican Party, and they're not old school conservatives. These are neocons who were exiled by commies and the anti-war commies in the Democratic Party. I mean, this is like, that's the real history, and those are the people who had put this dirty little spin that Republicans are all anti-labor or something, or they're anti-working man or something. Yeah, I mean, they're anti-using unions to, we're anti-Tammany Hall, I mean, we're anti stuff like that, machine and union politics like that, but not workers' rights or wages, like living wage, whatever, however you want to put it. That's ridiculous. I mean, that's just this is a brief time period of history that changed so much about what we think we knew about these holidays, these movements. And I mean, what does a man get up and work his ass for, Robert? And take New York. What does a working man climb the scaffolding of a skyscraper for every morning, but early before the sun comes up, even though he knows damn well he could die that day, eat his lunch on the end of a skyscraper? What is he doing it for? He's doing it for his family. He's doing it for the integrity of work. Those are all Republican values. I'm sorry. That's just it. So, I mean, maybe one time, if ever there was a time when these leftists were, somehow compatible with the values of holidays and things like celebrations like this, those days are over. They're long past. And honestly, I think they died when like people like bourbon Democrats like Grover Cleveland were replaced by fanatics. And they were fanatics. I mean, we talk about William Jennings Bryan a lot. I mean, that guy was a fanatic, bro. He was out there. I love him because I love people like that in history.
Great.
And he was out there, and then something happened to like the Jennings Bryan wing and it turned into like a Woodrow Wilson. Like something went dark there, bro. And it turned into like the Woodrow Wilson version of progressivism we now know today, which is still is it, only it's worse. It's darker than it ever was. But those days are over, I guess is my point, and
I attribute it to the rise of the sort of fitting within the sort of, how do you perceive labor? What's the value of labor?
Yeah.
What you attribute to the value to labor, and that, the left was taken over beginning in the late 19th, early 20th century. And there was a degree to which it was a continuation and an extension of what was happening in Europe and elsewhere. But the professional managerial class as a class began to take over the Democratic Party, took over the progressive movement, took over progressivism as a cause. And everything for them came down to that their way of life and their values should be the dominant ones. And for them, labor had to serve a purpose, right? You couldn't just be working to work. You couldn't just work because work was intrinsically valuable. You couldn't work in order to support your family or your community or your country. You couldn't work in order to brag about what it is you made or created or enabled or helped, but rather you had to work because it was an expression of your true self. You had to work because you were the one trained and given the special credential and license and education to do so. That you served a particular role in that regard. The sort of new aristocracy that was like the priestly class of centuries before was now going to be in positions of government, in positions of education, in positions of human resources, in positions of marketing and advertising. And so this professional managerial class starts to take over as a political force. And as such, they couldn't be more opposite. And I think they still to this day can't even understand the true American populist understanding of labor. Like, you're right. If you go back to William Jennings Bryan, you go back to the populist movement of the late 19th, early 20th century, same time Labor Day comes around as peak populist movement, the beginning of a meaningful labor movement in the United States. But an old school labor union, this was before government unions, right? The professional class is all about government unions or taking over the leadership of private sector unions. It's not about doing the kind of labor that those unions form. That for them to be a laboring man, a working man, place was a source of pride. The job itself was a source of pride. The work you put into it was a source of pride. Yeah. It was especially awesome if you got to make something, that you could point to. I made that. I created that. I built that. I designed that. Now there's a certain degree to which it's more masculine than feminine. but that was a traditional understanding of where masculine work was in the marketplace, private female work was in the home. That all the essential, that's how the division of labor worked, and there was still respect for women labor because women's labor just was seen as providing a different role than men's labor, and that so you go back to that time period, they all value what you do. And you get the professional managerial class just wages war on it. It says no, you're not a proud worker making something. You're a wage slave. You're stuck in the system that you don't understand that to be evolved is, to be hanging out, talking to us at our coffee shop kind of thing. Different cultural values, different social values, different economic interests. And that, to them, it makes no difference whether you're at Starbucks in the service industry or making a car. And in the process, they hollowed out a critical value, human value to labor was the community it provided, being able to provide for your family, being able to provide. Like when I was going around the world looking at where there was differences in terms of crime rates and other issues, you discover that when men are weak, societies are weak. Yeah. And I was wondering, why is it like African-American society mirrored East European Russian society, at least in terms of women and men gender relations? And it came down to men in both groups had been economically stripped of the ability to provide and protect for their family. And that when you're unable to provide and protect for your family, it destroys the family as a unit. You destroy the family as a unit, you destroy the community. You destroy the neighborhood. Ultimately, sooner or later, you're going to wreck a country. This was Christopher Lash's point. It goes from being a Frankfurt communist or Frankfurt Marxist to being a radical populist intellectual. And it was because of studying the family, how important the family was as the foundation of everything. That the family as a limitation, as a restraint, as to give context to why you do what you do. And that the professional managerial class, anti-family, anti-religion, anti-community, anti-neighborhood, they're opposed to all the values that things like the Labor Day parade a century ago were celebrated for in places like ethnic neighborhoods of New York.
Yeah, and I don't know how any of that works or fits together when you have an ideology that doesn't even believe in the right to your own labor, right? Which was huge in the labor movement. And they even extend that now to some people in their managerial class, in their own professional class. So like, because that's the nature of things like this. It gets out of hand, and it goes even further. So, once upon a time, they'd argue with somebody like, by the way, I love this guy, I'm just going to put him up. Huge, obviously, in the labor movement. And what Robert's saying is like exemplified by his clash with another man who was most definitely part of the professional class. This is, of course, Jimmy Hoffa. This guy's like my freaking hero. Every Irish, Italian even, who drove a truck in the 5 boroughs, even, they love this guy. Are you kidding me? And you could see that dynamic. And it's funny because I do like both men. I just feel like they were products of their own time and what you just described. And you had Robert Kennedy, of course, who was constantly going after Hoffa. And, there's this element like they just are two different types of people and what their versions of like how a man, RFK's like, this is how a gentleman acts, and Hoffa's more like, no, this is how a man grabs your own balls, like, like toughen up. And and they just represent two very different things. And I don't know, again, I mean, how, because people on the so-called right would call Hoffa a communist back in his day, right? Like, oh, you're a commie. And it's so different from the people that we see now on the modern left that are full-blown communists. The problem with that is you don't then, if you are a leftist, your ideology does not allow you to tell an individual that they are entitled to the value of their work, right? And we see this even with healthcare, right? You have a doctor who's forced, Robert. Like, so the problem with universal healthcare and free healthcare is very simple. Do the doctors and the nurses not have a right to their own labor? I mean, so this is crazy. You're making their job like an essential government service instead of a practice, which is what it once was, obviously, right? This is their craft, and you're taking that from them. And something else you said too, which I think is huge, the role of masculinity in all of this and in societies, because I don't know how anybody could refute what you just said. I mean, male roles are very, very important. We had another shooting, by the way, and I was debating this with somebody last week, the end of last week, which is that, the trans thing, right? Of the right jumped on the train. There's an epidemic, clearly, of trans shooters in this country. But I don't want people to lose sight of the fact that I actually don't think it's the trans thing we should be focusing on. It's that stealing of the role, the masculine role in society, because the modern phenomena that is mass shooting started in the University of Texas in 1966, right? The damn Second Amendment's been ratified since 1791. I mean, this is clearly a modern mental problem, and it just has presented itself in different forms over the years. In the 80s, when we did have a return to masculinity, all right, it was a revolt, even started in the 70s, of the counterculture. From the 60s, things seemed to be getting a little bit better. The role of men and the integrity of work, these things were getting valued again. But by the 90s, the 90s were the era of male neutering. I mean, that's when it really started. And we had Columbine at the end of that decade. And I just feel like it's the same thing, Robert. It's just taking a different form. Because what do all these male shooters have in common? They have no purpose. They have no sense of who they are. In some cases, like this new version, they're deluded. They think they're another gender. Like they're suffering from a delusion, So when we talk about something simple, like the importance of the family unit being the building block of the society, it's like if you're a scientific mind, guys out there, think about the family. It's like it's protein. It's like a protein. It's the building blocks of life, right? This is the building blocks of a strong society. Without it, you can't have it. And you need those roles to be respected, and you need people to have that integrity that comes along with doing their role. And without it, we lose our minds. We're social creatures. We're losing our shit because you're asking us to be something that's not natural. It's unnatural to us. I don't understand why so many people have a difficult time understanding this, right? I mean, and the integrity that comes with work is so important. Every side, all sides need to recognize that and value it and celebrate it, because of course, it's so self-evident. It's just so obvious. Without it, things crack and come apart.
Well,
and
it's deeply embedded in the American psyche. So that you read the old rhetoric, including the Revolutionary era rhetoric, then the Jacksonian era rhetoric, then the populist era, as it's described in parts of American historical literature, the late 19th, early 20th century, the various populist movements, Huey Long and during the New Deal era, the Jim Folsom, governor of Alabama, Southern populism. You have different variants. You got Northeastern, Southern, Midwestern, Western. You've got different religious variants. But one of the things they all share in common is this. You'll see this reference to the value of something comes from the labor. It goes all the way back to John Stuart Mill, right? It was what gives you the right to property. Well, 100%. Actually, it starts with your labor. You have capital, but the capital isn't what gives the property value. It's your labor added to the capital that gives the property value. So this labor theory of value that became associated with the left was originally a very American and populist idea that I deserve something because God made me, and that's where my rights come from. And I deserve something because I earned it, and I earned it by working for it. In other words, like you look at the American psyche, there's a deep belief that labor has real value in ways that America has never been big on. Nobody looks up to the guy who inherited his wealth. Just nobody does. Like, okay, you inherited it, whatever. We kind of almost see them as less than fully men. He's kind of a weak, kind of a wuss. That's the image you get. So that, America is deeply proud of its laboring capacity, that its rights come from that its identity comes, that often you'll see the deserved wealth, quote unquote, is labor. And that's at both ends of the spectrum. So whether it's considered the lazy rich who inherit it all and sit around and do nothing but, gorge and on their gluttonous appetites, or whether it's the so-called, often stereotype, but lazy poor, right? It's somebody who's agreed to be compromised by the system and become dependent on the government for their way of being. But once again, one of the biggest moral critiques of both groups is that they don't value labor, that
Yeah.
they don't earn what they get. They don't earn their keep. They don't contribute to the community through their labor. And it's like the value of labor is a unifying populist theme that runs deep in American psyche, and that the left's disregard of it, disrespect for it, which is something I think they don't understand either. It was like part of even the disrespect of a cop or a soldier was
Yeah.
respect of the labor that they put into it, that that the left so easily had, and their dismissal of manual labor and promoting their nerd label. Learn to code is really cultural, is part of this cultural conflict that's happened between what you could broadly call the working classes, which within that you can have very successful people, but people who pride their success on their labor, as opposed to people who, that's those kind of people, that their hands are dirty. They work in the mines. They're those nasty construction workers whistling across the street. That's their stereotype and caricature. The hard hat rebellion, as they called 1968. Like the left always thought the hard hats would be on their side. And in many respects, they were on like the Vietnam War, but they hated the war protesters even more than they hated the war. Why? Because the war protesters were a bunch of commie pinko dropouts smoking pot and spitting on the flag and despising their values and sneering on their moral ways of life, their suburban shtick, all of that kind of thing. And when down and you get underneath it all, it's how do you value labor? And the Americans have always valued real labor. The elites have never valued labor. They just want to strip it from other people. They demean it. That's why it's something for peasants to do. It's something for slaves to do.
Immigrants, undocumented immigrants, right? Oh, no American wants to do this job because they have no concept of what makes up an American, that identity itself. I mean, the idea that there aren't Americans who want to have, again, guys, it's that feeling that comes with making and creating or harvesting, right? Something like that. That's it. Those are healthy things for us. Though, this all goes back to what you're talking about. Really does go back to, de Tocqueville saw it, and Max Weber, the German sociologist, he saw it. And I mean, the founders kind of knew it, and they understood what it was because it was part of their religion, it was part of their worldview. But it's whether, you don't have to be Protestant, folks, but it's the Protestant ethic. The idea that like idle hands do the devil's work. That's Benjamin Franklin. That's where you heard that from. Maybe like everyone hears that expression. They have no idea where it comes from, but that is so Protestant ethic. I mean, that's it. And Max Weber was, trying to explain this to people in Europe at the time, would look at us like barbarian, crude, rude, right? And by the way, all the yuppies in New York, especially in Manhattan, look down Donald Trump like, why do you put a hard hat on and go hang out with those guys? Like, that's how they treated him. They did.
And happily serve, with his cufflinks, happily serve randos in the line. And, and he's all thrilled. He's waving at people. You know what I mean? You can imagine Donald Trump doing exactly that. And the reason why Donald Trump represents, in my view, understands these values much better than the normie politician is our political class has been taken over by people that are not working class at any level. They're people that many of them have. I mean, has DeSantis ever had a real job? Has Ted Cruz ever had a real job?
No.
Did Mitch McConnell ever have a real job? I mean, all these people, you go through and you're like, man, this guy was like in politics from the age of 8. It's like the Reese Witherspoon election movie. It's that kind of thing. It's just it's disgraceful. And to give I like to use the example of the UK, where our U.S. politics tends to move in the same direction as the UK. In the 1950s, most of the Labour Party members that were representatives in Parliament had working class backgrounds in the UK. Yeah. They were union leaders, union members. They had worked in the mines. They worked in the steel factories. They were Peaky Blinders kind of people. Birmingham, England kind of people. Today, I don't think there's a single working class person in the entire Labour Party representation in Parliament. Not one. They're lawyers. They're doctors. They got master's degrees and PhDs. They got lots of letters after their name. And, the kind of things that populists used to make fun of. You wanted to be like, it was like you're a real worker, and you weren't like, Revenge of the Nerds was nice, but it was still the nerds, right?
Yeah.
It's you were proud. You made fun of that kind of, oh, okay, whatever. You can't do real work. You can't work on you can't do to work high up in the factories. I mean, it's like those famous working class photos of those guys sitting 300 feet, however high up in the air, and they're on one of those little steel beams, and they're just hanging out there eating their lunch.
A sandwich with their box.
Yeah, I mean, it was old. It was real working class, rooted in and I see it with the Amish. Right? Like the closest thing you get to American style celebration of labor is the day-to-day lifestyle of the Amish. People start helping at the age of 4 and 5. It's a family enterprise. It's a community enterprise. Women work separate from men. Women work, they're doing baking, they're doing family stuff, they're doing teaching, they're doing nursing, they're doing the things that have traditionally been aligned with more feminine values. And the men do more of the physical labor, more of the harder labor, the labor that gets you dirtier and so forth. But it works and it's sustained. Like the Amish are not experiencing the psychological issues, the emotional issues, to some degree, the monetary and economic issues that the society all around them is experiencing, because they've decided to continue to maintain their own traditions and byways. And when their kids grow up, girls and boys alike, they have a chance to leave and experience life outside of the Amish for a year to 2 years. Over 90% choose the Amish way of life. They don't choose the Western way of life. And it's that Amish way of life that respects labor, that respects nature, that respects community, that respects family, that respects God. They're showing that there's a key to happiness in all of this. Not just what's good politics, what's good culture.
Right. I'm talking about well-being, Robert.
But yeah, it is exactly. People in the Amish are much happier. And I would suggest that when we properly respected labor and recognized the gender differences in the value of the contribution of that labor, we had much happier families, much happier communities, and much happier countries.
And for folks in the media looking for, looking for clips they can take out of context, like, you also were in such miserable pieces of shit when you were more a working class profession. It's a great example. It's like you had Mike Wallace. This guy wore the shoe leather off the bottom of his damn foot every day. And yet his son, who's raised with every privilege in the world, does not have the experience that he has, is given like a yuppie, given to him everything, including a show on Fox News because of his last name, and for a time being anyway. And look at him. No respect for anything you just were talking about. No connection whatsoever to those values. And that's just so very different from his old man. And it's like the sin of that generation was not passing along the values and virtues of where they came from. And by the way, I'm terrified of that as a father. Terrified of that. I want them to have every privilege in the world, but I do not want them to forget where they came from. And so far, thank God, that's working, that's working out. Of course, don't worry, I still have a few years to screw it up, but so far it's looking great. But a lot of us did not do that. They didn't. And you have somebody like Chris Wallace who couldn't differ more from his own old man. You know what I mean? I mean, this is not the same person. Go back and look at old Mike Wallace interviews. Look at how he not only treats his guests or the subjects that are being interviewed in his work. Think about how he respects, whether he himself agrees or not, is not even relevant. He respects the other positions of the people watching the damn program, right? I mean, because he seems to have at least some idea of where everyone's coming from.
TV and film and books and local news all would celebrate a lot of those cultural values that as they got this story, you see like the late 60s, early 70s, the sort of film movement that it started to be a war on work, that your problem was work. Work was holding you back. Work was limiting you. Work was restraining you. It's like the old school liberalism, conservatism debate where you had the liberalism that's like, James Lindsay today, atomized individuals that have their own rights, it's society and these contexts and family. These are things limiting you and oppressing you. Yeah. And it was like these work values were limiting you and oppressing your true expression of your true self and your true identity and all of this. and that you just got to get away from these conservative traditions and conservative ways of organized living. And then you could live your truest self and be your pure. It's so individually driven. It's not individually driven the way the American Revolution about everybody has value because God created you.
Right.
In fact, it's just the opposite. It's saying God, believing in God is a hindrance, is a hurdle, is an obstacle, is a chain around your ankle. And you just got to free yourself from it. So free yourself from God, free yourself from country, free yourself from. This is what George Soros means by open society. He means to be unrestrained and unlimited and by uninhibited. And what has this produced? It produced trans school shooters. That's what it produces. Yep. Produced a society of people where more than half of young girls are on various serious psychiatric drugs. Where the men feel useless and hopeless and helpless, and thus they're living at home with their parents in the basement playing games rather than checking into society, assuming that they'll never have any hope, that there's no reason for faith, no reason for future. Contrast it like Russia has recognized this about 5-10 years ago, that all of a sudden they have a birth rate problem, that Western culture is a problem. So he starts to write reinvigorate the Russian Orthodox Church, reinvigorate Russian cultural conservatism, ban in certain instances Western influence of certain kinds that he thinks is devastating. He calls it your values, meaning trans and all the other issues that go with it. And instead start to, like what Hungary is trying to do, what Poland is trying to do, restore the family, recognize economically the family, protect politically the family, because the family truly is your true and only heaven, as Christopher Lasch explained. It's the only institution that really provides the best values for the best way of life. That, the key of the Amish is the farm is the basis of the family, and all of it's tied to labor. It gives them their sense of pride, their sense of honor, their sense of place. And when we don't respect and recognize, it was like Tucker Carlson's debate with Ben Shapiro, where Shapiro said, wouldn't it be great if we had all these automated trucks? And Tucker's like, why? Why do we want to replace the number one job for working class men in America? Why do we want to do that without thinking twice about it? Technology is not pure progress. If you take away people's families, people's communities, people's way of life, I don't call that progress. You can have people live physically longer. You can have more so-called wealth aggregate, but is that progress? I would say our founding generation, the way the Amish live, is a lot closer to progress than trans school shooters is progress.
Yeah, how is our mental well-being not considered when we're talking about progress? Like, how is that not factored into the equation, right? So great. There's a lot more, like I said, poor people with cell phones, but they're freaking crazy, man. Like that, you know what I'm saying? Like, so great. There's a lot more people who can, I wouldn't even say afford shelter, because some people are just get saddled by it. But whatever it may be, a computer, personal memories, we have come a far and long way from Steve Jobs' dream of having everyone own a personal computer. So that's great. I mean, but is that progress if we're using that to fulfill something that like naturally we're missing? Like you were saying, like you're in the basement in your mom's house playing video games instead of serving your purpose. So, I mean, is Steve Jobs' dream so great after all? Like, how is health and well-being? And I mean, not, I'm not talking about universal health care here. How is health and well-being of the individual in society? And then of course, what is a bunch of individuals, folks? That is the collective. How is that not part of this equation? And, I feel like it goes back to the social contract. The Ben Shapiros of the world, and I'm not saying this to attack Ben, but I'm simply saying this. The Ben Shapiros of the world need a social compact a lot more than me and people where I come from. I don't need protection from the state of nature as much as somebody like Ben Shapiro does. But this social contract now has evolved to the point where it's no longer, everybody gives up something a little bit of your natural rights. You're giving that up so we can all have some sort of security and a chance to pursue happiness. It's not that anymore. It's like this managerial professional class has now started to demand that labor, people who are in the working class basically have to give up more in order for them to have a higher standard of living. And that's causing and by the way, that's just one group, right? I mean, there's effeminate men who probably would have a more difficult time in a state of nature. It's no longer like we're now asking you to give up some of your natural rights. You know, we're actually asking you to sacrifice and suffer beyond some of what others are, so I could feel more comfortable about what I want and who I am. And it's like what I'm saying. Then Kurt Schlichter and I had this conversation before the election. Masculinity is being asked to be sacrificed in order to keep this compact together. And that comes with a whole lot of consequences, because you're right. I mean, there's no doubt the labor movement. I mean, several of this, had a serious masculine characteristic. We just popped Jimmy Hoffa up on the screen before. It doesn't get more machismo than Jimmy Hoffa, guys. I mean, right. So like that is all being asked to go away. I mean, it's like it's a bad thing. And they're actually doing it to us because it's not natural, and it's resulting in all this aberrant behavior. It's also resulting in lower test levels, Robert, and lower fertility rates. Like this isn't self-sustaining at all. So, I mean, you can import a bunch of people all you want, but if you wind up turning them into Alex Jones's gay frog like the rest of us, then they're done too, you know? And I mean, I'm making a joke here, but there is a valid point. Like Elon is right about that. He's 100% correct. These values, that's why the Russians and others, by the way, want nothing to do with it. I mean, they could just wait and breed us out at this point, Robert. I mean, I'm serious.
Yeah. What is fascinating is that one of Elon's obsessions is the complete decline of replacement birth rates.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something that a society that protects the family and that recognizes that there's true gender difference in successful social roles to play. That I think one of the great mistakes of feminism was completely degrading traditional women's labor in the division of labor gender-wise within society. That literally the most important thing any species does is continue the species. And women exclusively have a monopoly over the reproduction of humanity.
Right.
And there's nothing that's probably could be more consequential. And so motherhood, sort of the defining aspect of femininity, gets brutally attacked by the left. That, that to be a mother was to be in chains. To be a mother was to be oppressed. To be a mother was to have the state control your body. Right. And instead, abortion becomes the ultimate feminist tribute, which is very against the what I would call sort of populist versions of feminism, religious conservative versions of feminism, all of which existed. I mean, the prohibition movement was led by conservative women, who were mad about their Irish Catholic and Italian Catholic husbands getting drunk on the way home. Yeah. And like, well, we just need to prohibit you from drinking. That's what we need to do. I mean, I did tell somebody the other day, maybe we should reconsider women voting. It hasn't turned out great when I'm in front of all these women judges. I'm like, man, we should go back to the 1850s. But
Nucky was wrong, man. Nucky was wrong.
But there was something natural to it that just makes people happier. That, like, whether you call it God's design, like, just as we have been, no society has replaced God. Well, every effort to do so has backfired, has led to a disastrous world, unhappy people, unhappy societies, unsustainable societies. And in the same sense, trying to replace labor, the value inherent to labor, God's productive capacity instilled in mankind, and the gender components of that labor, that that labor that women do and labor that men do, that when that was degraded for women, that motherhood was bad, that cooking is bad, that being a homemaker is bad, that protecting the home, you had the male protecting the family from the outside world and be able to provide for the home, and then the maternal figure protecting the home itself. That we overthrow that whole thing and say there's no gender differences anymore, that if you're a real successful woman, that's going to be measured by how much you're like a man, rather than how much of the uniquely maternal skill set you have. And the net effect has been to divorce people from our true value, divorce people from God. And what that's produced is anarchistic societies, not in a good way. Societies without core values, societies without direction. That's how you get this kid who feels tortured, who says he wished he never bought into all the training nonsense, and who thinks his only way out is murder suicide. That that's as much a condemnation of the left and modern world, modern society, modern media, modern academia, and all the rest as any. Is a society that produces that outcome is a society that has chosen the wrong values. And that we return to the values of labor, family, country, God, that these are values that even if you don't believe in those things as objective truths, as some of us do believe, it's just the inevitable result of study of psychology of humankind and history is that these things are necessary for people to live happy lives.
Yeah, our founders would have called what you were talking about before, that's the natural law. Like you can't go against the natural order and expect anything but a disaster to follow. And even if you don't believe in that and you don't believe in absolute truths like they did, like we do, you have to be able to objectively look at the result and say, well, all right, even if you think you're like, we're fooling ourselves with this God giving us rights and God giving us roles, right? Even if you think that we're fooling ourselves and you don't believe in that, you have to acknowledge that obviously that is the more stable way for us to live. That leads to better, more healthy behavior and well-being and a sense of belonging, right? And you can't deny that we are social animals. So like this idea that we can somehow break free of all of these chains, these like social order chains is crazy. It's not working, Robert. It's not working. And I would argue, because everybody always says when we see these shootings, only in America, right? It's the guns. No, I would argue it's because we were the most truest, most purest form of what we are intended to be, and how as human beings we're in society, supposed to behave and interact, and are those roles were the purest forms of those. And that's what our founders were trying to create. This. And they weren't going to make a second Israel, but like a nation that is living and behaving as close as God has intended us to do. And when you take that away and those roles and that identity is already ingrained in our society, and when you take that away, it has dramatic consequences. And that's what we're living through. And by the way, I don't care what happens in Europe. I don't care. I mean, some of these habits, right? And the Russians are fleeing from, keep your Western values over there, England, our own founders did the same thing. They wanted away from those behaviors. The French, they were disgusting, debauchery, right? No morals, nothing, completely corrupt, right? Didn't matter if it was a monarchy or a revolution. Corrupt to the core, no respect for human rights, not the real way that God intended. Or, the British, who they just thought were in their own ways, too effeminate, and call me a barbarian. I don't give a damn. And look at you, imagine Franklin running around with that damn thing on that animal on his head, man, loving the looks that he was getting from those people. Like, that's right, I'm wearing this on my head. That's right, I'm an animal. He was doing it on purpose because of the British, they now betrayed he felt by them. When he walked in that office, he was a patriot. He walked out, and for people who don't know what I'm talking about, this is the most famous man in the world, and the ruling class of England treated him they treated him in that room like he was a second-class subhuman. And this is the most famous man in the world, certainly the most famous man in the Western world. So when he came out, he embraced it. He embraced it all and never looked back. And then we spent decades upon decades, now 250 years ingraining this in who we are, and then just try to take it away because of some new, set of ideas, which, by the way, they're not new. This is the thing, guys. All of these leftist ideas that we think are damaging now to these things we're talking about, none of them are new. They're repackaged and resold throughout human history and human civilization, and they always lead to catastrophe. Always. You had somebody like Cicero screaming from the rooftop, about the dangers of politicizing the law, and the dangers of all that, and he just was ignored, and then what happened? How did that end up? Right. Periclean democracy, they look back at, and it was a great idea, good in principle, a nice step in the right direction for human history and how to govern free men. But in the end of the day, it cannibalizes itself, especially when you all go for your own virtues, or you start to the tyranny of the majority is allowed to just like reign over everybody. I mean, these are not new ideas. We've seen these over the course of human history. And I don't want to get biblical on anybody, but this is not the first time guys started to dress like girls and girls started to dress like guys. It didn't work out. It doesn't work out. Right. So that in and of itself, I mean, Christianity was a movement back to sanity with that stuff, which, by the way, civilized the world. Even if you're not a Christian, you can't deny its role in civilizing humanity through all over the world. So I just don't know how you can argue with that. But now here we are again, and we're rehatching the same. These are the same ideas of antiquity that didn't work. I mean, what's wrong with us? Why do we do this? What is it about you? Why do we do this?
Yeah, I mean the old legend that the two great schools of learning that can't be closed by any corrupt state or society are the archives of nature and the rights of man. And one of the critical components of that is recognizing the value of labor and respecting that value, honoring that value, and cherishing that value in the way you structure economic and social relations. And when you don't, your societies tend to fail more often than succeed. And that's, I think, our lack of respect for labor for the last half century of American social culture, of American polity, of American economy, is a key component, fracture in the foundation of the American constitutional republic and the happiness of ordinary everyday people. And the sooner and earlier and quicker we restore that, which we can do, it would take time, as people in the chat have noted, that some of these things been eroded over half a century. They won't be fixed tomorrow, but there are steps we can take to reorient our public policy and social community and value system around family, around community, around tradition, around heritage, around labor. That I think would be key to restoring on this Labor Day. The American constitutional republic is learning to recognize and respect and value labor once again in all of its forms and formulations. Now, I thought one thing we'll do before we get to any questions, I thought we'll have a segment with each What Are the Odds show. I'm going to pitch Cauchy on sponsoring the show. Is we do a Cauchy segment. So we pull up Cauchy and look up the politics, see if there's any odds that current markets that look interesting to us.
So let me bring it up. I mean, if you want, do you have one you just want to look it up? And
I'll just pull it up, see if something popped up that looked interesting to us. I mean, there's new markets they're posting. I
got you. I'm all over it. Even contracts are on the way. Markets, and then there's live. Ooh, look at this sports, politics. Let's go. Whoops. Let me Let me bring this up. Share the screen.
See what
And by the way, while I'm doing that, I just will say this, Robert. Like the entire reaction of the ruling class to the 2016 election is a disrespect for labor. You have to, because you won't listen to the grievances.
Is that too writ large? I mean, Trump's a guy who grew up around construction workers. That's why he's different than all of his rich pals and buddies. Yeah. That he had his best fun working with ordinary people on the construction site, and he came to value that. That we grew up at a time when you started working when you were young, but there was value to it. It wasn't seen as oppressive. It wasn't seen as wage slavery. It was seen as an opportunity to have value, to contribute, to have pride. To work from a young age. Now, also, my grandfather favored the fact that if there was a relative that he didn't have to pay a minimum wage even when they're 10 years old. So but putting that aside from it, we'll see if there's anything interesting pops up on the politics trending or other fronts.
There are some interesting. I mean, first and foremost, it jumps right out at me on the politics front, which I think is a representation of culture and this idea of where the Republican Party has gone and re-embraced what they were, by the way, is that JD Vance is like, it's just not because he's vice president. We have seen this with other vice presidents in the past. They get taken on seriously. JD Vance, from prediction markets to polls, is hands down the only person that people can even imagine leading this party in the future. And there are always dark horses, but man, the guy is doing everything he needs to do. I told him the first time I think we ever spoke, I'm like, you could be president of the United States. You know that, right? And as modest as he is, he's like, get the fuck out of here. I'm like, no. You don't get it. Like, the ruling class has like officially pissed off the American public. And until what these things that we're talking about change, Robert, they're never going to respect these people. So there's always going to be like this anti-backlash vote, and as long as there's somebody who they feel is authentic, to be that vehicle, to be that vessel, then they'll give it to them. And so far, I mean, JD has just done an incredible job, I think. Let's make a couple of them, though. New York City mayoral election,
I think Mondani. I still, I was curious. Okay, so that'll be good. That's kind of election coming up. So we could cover some of the 2025 elections. That you could click on what are the odds are that Mondani will win. My thought process is, I was skeptical of Mondani winning, principally because of the heavy Jewish vote in New York City. Would they actually vote for part one? Because would they vote for a guy who runs around who's a Muslim, who says, I want to globalize the Intifada, while Israel is a hot political button? Jesus. So that was my first questions about Mondani. I thought Mondani would do great amongst young lefty progressives, that the young progressives are very radical. They're very AOC. They identify, many of them, as socialists, that the young professional managerial class in New York City is going to love Mondani because he's going to take the city over and have all these government bureaucratic solutions for all their problems. That the problem is private enterprise, that the problem is the family, the problem is community, the problem is neighborhood, according to these young progressives. But the problem, so I got that would fuel his base. But the two groups I had doubts about, or I say three groups. One group, older Jewish voters, would they vote for the Muslim globalize the Intifada? As of now, the answer is yes, they would, which tells you a little bit the issue where Israel is at. The second group I had doubts about were ethnic voters in New York. I mean, New York is the ultimate ethnic city. Kevin Phillips described, it's always about either the Jews get the hospital, or the Irish get the hospital, or the Puerto Ricans get the hospital. I mean, Mayor Koch was brilliant at, pitting one group against the other and maneuvering.
He was.
I'm gonna screw over the Jamaicans in favor of the of other black voters, right? I mean, because they break down that to that degree of minutia in New York City politics. But historically, your ethnic conservatives, not only your white ethnic conservatives, but your black and Hispanic ethnic conservatives, when it comes to city politics, are very pragmatic. They tend to want low taxes. They tend to want secure crime. Secure streets from crime and decent schools. Now, to a degree, because New York City is such a huge government entity, there's a lot of them that have ties to public employee unions and public jobs, and there's that aspect too. But I was skeptical that these voters, for all their leftism, to a degree on a national stage, tend to be conservative at the local level, especially in places like New York City when it comes to day-to-day concerns. So I thought that they would rebel against Mondani ultimately. And then the last group was, where do black voters go? Adams was the second or third black mayor of New York City. There was talk of him running. I think now he's going to drop out. He's just not making any progress, and he'll drop out. And somebody will pay him off and say, "Hey, you drop off. We'll give you this gig or that gig." The Trump administration's already backed off of criminal prosecutions. It's so that Cuomo can have along with the guardian angel guy. Because that's it. So right now you have, for those that don't know, you have Mondani,
always that guardian angel.
Yeah,
always running for mayor. This guy.
Yeah. So you have Mondani, the Marxist Muslim, Cuomo, the who lost the Democratic primary, former governor of New York, son of former Governor Mario Cuomo, brother of Fredo, who works at News Nation or wherever it is. Then you've got Eric Adams, who's still in the race at the moment, and Silva, the Republican nominee, former guardian angel guy from the 80s and take back the subways, New York
Yep.
City. And the assumption is heavy from Mamdani because he's got a young progressive base that loves him in New York City. That older Jewish voters have no problem with him wanting to globalize the Intifada because Israel's Israel's way underwater politically. And
Bibi is to blame for that. Can I just interrupt real quick and just say this? Because I know this from friends, leftist friends that poll this race. Bibi is literally to blame for Mamdani winning this election. Cuomo was ahead 3 days before the bombing over the weekend. Look, it's a low turnout primary. It always is in New York City. Mamdani won the white affluent votes, and honestly, Cuomo did better among those who were more minority based, but they don't show in those kinds of elections. And then New York City tends to kind of just go with the flow when these primaries get shaken out. I will just say this because I was asked, what do I think about this? I said that Silva didn't have a prayer. He didn't have a prayer and never did. And that he honestly should drop out himself, and that the Republican Party should back Eric Adams as an independent. That's your only shot at stopping Mamdani. That's what I told people privately. They didn't listen. The New York Republican country clubs kind of weird version of they're like gangsters in a country club in New York. They didn't listen. They don't listen for shit. They don't know what they're doing. And now this is what they got. And by the way, they all cheered over the let's topple Iran. Well, look at you now, you stupid idiots. I'm sorry. They are so stupid, man. They have done after years and years of just watching you take the most beautiful state with the most beautiful city in the world and destroying it because you can't effectively counter a single political party, even though they're awful at governing. When the most popular mayor ever from the Republican Party, any party, handed you on a silver platter, a new image of the Republican Party, a new brand. They're just idiots, Robert. And I mean, kind of good for you. I'm taking the Thomas Jefferson position. The government you elect is the government you deserve. And that's it. And they deserve this. Now you're going to get socialized grocery stores. This is not a new idea. It'll be an utter disaster. This guy's going to make de Blasio look like a freaking choir boy when he gets in there. This is going to be so bad. And for Mike Cernovich, he said, how much power does a New York mayor really have? A lot, Mike. A lot, bro. I'm telling you, it's bad. This is very bad. And by the way, it just happens to be the financial center of the world. So, let's see. Between trying to sue Donald Trump for normal business practices, and take and seize his business assets, and this, I'm not even sure New York City is going to be the hub it once was for the financial markets, man. I think, this could go very bad, Robert. I know that does sound like hyperbole, but after a while, is it? I mean, is it? If they can't get them under control within 3 to 6 months, there's going to be some real problem.
Yeah, I think the interesting question is somebody said in the chat that they thought the secular Jewish voters in New York City are anti-Israel. They're not. Secular Jewish. The reason is because they all know friends or family that are in Israel. So secular
they're anti-Likud. They're anti-Likud. That's true.
Correct. They're anti-Bibi Netanyahu.
Yeah, they hate Bibi.
But they're not at all anti-Israel. There's a small segment of Jewish left voters that have been anti-Israel from the inception because they were never pro-Zionist movement to begin with. And Lenin and a lot of them were anti-Israel, etc. That's the problem with the Nick Fuentes of the world who or Candace Owens, people who connect Lenin and the communists to Israel. And it's actually most of the communists were very anti-Israel that were Jewish because they saw that as anti-communist. So it's still a surprise that older Jewish voters are voting for the globalize the Intifada guy. What it shows is a degree to which those are not just anti-Israel Jewish voters; those are pro-Israel Jewish voters that are right now are voting for Mamdani. But then the second question, one is, what is so? Let's say you're playing this out. What's the possibility that, the hit pieces start to roll? New York Times, New York Post, New York Daily, they're all going to start rolling out hit pieces on Mamdani. because he's a bridge too far for the neoliberal elites, and they think he will be a constant embarrassment.
That's what I was going to say. That's their terror right now. Yeah,
and for going forward, and that they don't want him to be the face in the front of the Democratic Party. And so the question is, assume for the moment that the media rallies against him, that Bill Ackman and the big money guys, there's a secular Jew who's very pro-Israel, Bill Ackman, New York City, that those guys roll out huge amounts of money. Let's assume they push Adams out. Let's assume I don't think Silwa will go anywhere, but let's assume they get the message out that Silwa can't win, so that you need to rally against Mamdani. Right now, the Cauchy markets say about a 1 in 10 chance, 1 in 9 chance of Cuomo winning. I would say that because
that's
of the
excessive.
Weaknesses,
that's
I get
excessive.
That's what. Yeah, I was curious what your thoughts are in terms of what the odds are, because Madame, as pointed out in the chat, he's got South Asian support, he's got Muslim support, he's got young progressive support. That's still not a majority. That's probably not even 40%. That's probably about 35% of the total general election vote. So the question is, can Cuomo rally everybody who's skeptical of Mamdani, whether it's older Jews, ethnic working class voters that might be looking at voting for Silva, the ethnic minority voters that are looking at backing Adams or somebody else, the working class voter, hey, look, the crime will go rampant. The schools will fall apart. The hospitals won't function. You'll have a bunch of little globalized, the Intifada. The protesters will take over and run the whole city. It will look like 1970s shithole New York City. You don't want that to happen. And let's say he runs an effective, that's what the kind of campaign they need to run. They need to run a pure scare campaign against Mamdani, focused on everyday way of life issues. Whereas if I was Mamdani, I would come up with a plan. He's got his progressive base locked in. I would come up with a neighborhood by neighborhood plan to try to preempt this. I would say, here's what I'm going to do in your neighborhood. Here's how I'm going to fix the road or the local park or the local school. I mean, politics is really local in New York City. But I'm not seeing signs from either one, either the anti-Mamdani forces being able to consolidate or come up with a consistent messaging. Especially the ideological messaging isn't going to work. Like, I see these conservatives say, oh, he's a Marxist, he's a communist. Well, it's New York City. I mean, it's 80% Democratic city. So, the conservative messaging is very unlikely to derail Mamdani. And I think some conservatives, if you're in Trump world, you probably like Mamdani as a foil on a national stage. You being able to try to send troops in.
100%.
All of that. But assuming they were smart, assuming Mamdani's campaign is not smart at how they campaign, assuming his opposition is smart at how they organize, if that were to happen, I see a scenario where the ethnic voters and older Jewish voters pull back at the last minute and vote against him. I personally put those odds at somewhere around 25% that Mamdani doesn't win. What do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say, you're looking at 70, 75%, this, 80 and above is like, that's very excessive, especially since the polls really don't have him anywhere near a majority. There's one that did, it wasn't a good poll. It was, by the way, I think it was less than 400 sample size or something. It's New York City. I have to say this too, just in full disclosure, they did approach me to poll this race. I gave them, a fair ballpark number. These people would rather spend their money on other things, apparently. And I had to explain to them how detailed the boroughs are. Like, you live there, you should know this. How do you not know which groups by this point? How are you still speculating which groups may or may not be uncomfortable with Mamdani as the mayor of New York? If you don't know that by now, then I don't know if I could even help you at this point. Like, it's so late. Not that I wouldn't try, and not that it probably, things are possible. I mean, Mayor Giuliani turned around an election in 24 hours when he endorsed Bloomberg. But I just think that they don't know enough, Robert. They don't. I mean, ultimately, Mamdani does still need what happened in the primary level to happen in the wider general electorate, which is that white, educated liberals were okay with him. And that's why You had like like the Dinkins scare era. That's why you did see Giuliani, folks. When he first won, he only won by very low double digits. I think it ultimately ended up a 2 or 4 point win. It wasn't a lot, right? And it was just because a certain percentage of white educated liberals would not vote. Things are kind of would not vote for Dinkins again. It was a disaster. And that's what it has to be, a scare campaign, because that's who he's got to scare. I really don't think you're going to see black voters in New York City run to the polls for Mamdani. I just don't think you're going to have a very weird general electorate. And he's going to have the most energized voters out there. There's no doubt that, again, part of this was the bombing. There was an increase in Muslim turnout when he won that primary. It's always a very low primary electorate. It's just a pathetic turnout rate. It was, but you could see there was a little disparate turnout advantage for Muslims over other voters. And if that happens in the general, I mean, he'll still do this. I just don't see it being the overwhelming win some people think it's going to be. Cuomo still has a huge name, Robert. And for anyone who's uncomfortable, they're going to go, I do think one thing that's hurting Cuomo, he's got this like double-edged sword thing going on where he's made some very favorable comments toward Trump, which is pissing off some in his own party. And then the other side of that is that he's having a hard time finding home with some of these other voters that otherwise would vote for him and kind of are a little Trumpy, new Trumpy kind of voters in New York because of COVID. And it's like, I mean, he was one of the leading people. Like, no, you can't bury your uncle. No, you can't bury your mother. No, no, you can't go see them at the old folks' home. Just ridiculous. The press conferences every day. Then there was the accusations. I mean, we all know about the little scandals, the treatment of certain women and others. I mean, that's a bloody. I actually thought the COVID stuff was way worse. The fact that they had data apparently that showed, these policies were actually dangerous. Signing that executive order killed a lot of old people, folks. I mean, he killed a lot of old people. I mean, it's hard to get past that shit, Robert. It is, and then people might not tell a pollster that's their number one issue, but they won't vote because of it, or and then of course it's the left. So in a city that's largely Democratic, to have these accusations that you foster an unhealthy work environment for women is not good. Plus I could see it. Can't you look at Andrew and his brother Chris and just say, yeah, they do that shit? Yeah, they touched her. Yeah, they grabbed that. Like, of course you can, because they look like those kind of guys, right or wrong. And I'm not saying you did it, Chris, so don't fucking email me, bro. All right, take that shit to News Nation. I don't want to hear it. I'm not saying it happened. I'm saying that it's just like a perception of people. Obviously, you're all Guidos from New York. I mean, I fall under the same stereotype. All right, so that's just the reality. I just don't know at this point, Robert, how they can make. I'm not even sure they have the money to do that, to make these liberals uncomfortable with Mamdani. I'm not, they already elected Bill de Blasio, folks. He was a card carrying, Sandinista, for Christ's sake. I mean, now look, and he's going to be small. He's going to be nothing. He's going to be a moderate compared to this guy. I mean, this is why, and I'll end it with this. This is why it is so damn important what I said after the election. Instead of clapping like a bunch of stupid seals, everybody should have realized that there are these voters out there that are not just going to vote for a Republican because Donald Trump is a Republican. These guys, I went there. I was in the boroughs. We went to Little Egg Harbor. We were all over the place. There were signs everywhere. Trump or bust, Democratic congressman or woman. Trump or bust, the Democrat for this city council. Trump or they are splitting their tickets like crazy, and there's nothing but hard work to do. Look at Scott Pressler's video, by the way, the other day. He's trying to pull the fire alarm. Like, gonna lose this race. You're gonna lose Virginia. You're gonna lose New Jersey. Which New Jersey, Jesus, man, if you can't win with Jack, come on, man. Speaking of which, let's look at that one, Robert. We got to have the New Jersey.
Yeah, we can cover that. So we covered two races: the New York City mayor's race and the New Jersey governor's race as part of
and whatever else you want to do.
Yeah, well, yeah. I figure we'll cover those two. Is this one? It is as part of the Cauchy corner feature of. But my official pick will be that Cuomo at 11% is worth the bet, because I think it's more likely to go up than down between now and election day. Because it'll be increasingly clear that Silva can't win, and that Adams can't win. It wouldn't surprise me to see one or two or both drop out, but I think their voters will drop off as it becomes Mamdani or bust. Then I think Cuomo will get the vestige of that, so he'll go up. But I would say that Mamdani is the deserved favorite at this point in New York City.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I agree with everything you said. But 86%, 83%, that's crazy. So it is worth the bet right now, 100%. New Jersey governor. I don't know if this one's going to get any better because I just have some inside information. Jack's getting no help again. He's, of course, not even the official, but he will need a lot of help. He can't go up and down Route 9 in a pickup truck, guys, from diner to diner. Like, this is, and not for nothing, but all these Republicans are letting the early vote machine just fall apart. And New Jersey is a great example of that. Why? Because it was run largely by a bunch of third-party groups and volunteers. The state parties all want to take credit for shit they did not do. And then they didn't. I'm not saying like people should be in it for the money, guys, but I am saying when people spend large amounts of their own money to help the cause, and then every piece of shit, Dick, Tom, and Harry, whatever the hell that expression is, gets the benefit, the financial benefit, you piss people off. They did it for their own. They did it for their true believers. They did, and then they're not going to just keep doing it as if it's a freaking charity. Like there's a lot of money being made in this business, and everyone who is a useless nobody is getting it. New Jersey is another example of that. I know somebody who did a lot of work there. They spent a fortune. They did stuff on their own, and the state party's a mess, and they're not going to recoup that. So it's just a lost investment. I mean, it was pointless. And you could tell me all day, well, they should do it because they're patriots. Okay, then you do it. You spend $250,000 of your own money and solicit $250,000 from this friend and $250,000 from that friend, come back with nothing but your D in your hand to show for it, other than, and a 2024 win or narrow loss in the case of New Jersey. It's not enough, guys. It's not enough. Meanwhile, all of the typical consultant class losers who do nothing but waste money are living in mansions in Loudoun County. Like, so what the hell do you want from these people? And I'll tell you right now, maybe he can respond if he wants, but I don't know what Charlie's going to do this year. Charlie turned to his people and were like, give us money and we will help win this election. And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure Charlie's doing all right, but he hasn't been given some kind of authority over that operation. So what's going to happen to Arizona? I mean, they got it. This was priority one, Robert. It was nothing else was more important than this. Now we have New Jersey is another great example. Look at Trump's performance in Morris County. Look at his performance even in a Republican county like Monmouth, which they came close to losing several times now. Trump thumped her there. He extended it up, flipped Morris, all the way up to Bergen, outperformed every freaking Republican we've seen in a decade. And they don't do anything about it? Come on, man. This is just... It's so bad. It's frustrating beyond frustrating. But go ahead, I'll let you.
For context, what was the margin in 2024 in New Jersey? I thought it was
6 points. 6 points, yeah, barely just under 6 points, yeah.
So it leans Democratic by about 5 points, something like that.
Right, but
by 7,
but it's worth noting. Yeah, it was 6.1%. But it's worth noting that New Jersey, along with Hawaii, was one of only 2 states that moved more to the left from 2008 with Obama's win to his reelection. The whole damn country moved against. So this was a state that was extremely more favorable to Democrats in the country overall. And Donald Trump shifted it from being a 20-plus Democratic state to 6 points. Number one, there aren't enough independents in New Jersey to do that. Trump had to win a massive number of Democrats. I don't give a shit what exit poll says what. There's only one way to do it. Go look at the voter file and you will see that Republicans are like 19% or something. It's atrocious. He had to win an enormous margin with independents and somewhere in the neighborhood of like 16 or 70% of Democrats. And they just let it go. They just let it go, So it was very close and trending that way. There's also auto voter registration, which in a state like New Jersey and a lot of the tri-state areas like this, Pennsylvania, I argued this as well, and everyone was having an anxiety attack over auto voter registration. It's not the same as it was 10 years ago. All of those normies who are now going to be auto voter registered or forced onto the voter registration list are more Republican than the registered voter population. It's not like it was 10 years ago where those were all Democrats sitting around and illegals getting on the. That's not it. These are largely working class people who have given up from the political process and they're done. So when you force them onto the voter rolls and you ask them what to pick, they're picking Republican. And it's not even really close in either state. So Republicans are making gains. And then you have people taking credit for it, Robert. It's a natural thing that's going on. And you have people taking credit with their hand out. You know?
No doubt.
It's unbelievable.
Now, in the last governor's race, though, Biden was president. And what ended the margin being, like 2 points?
Just under about 3 points. So Jack lost because of a late arriving batch in Bergen County. And that's what put Murphy over. Remember Monmouth Poll and others, they had Jack Citarelli losing that race by 11, 13 points. Both myself and Robert Cahaley were the only ones to show a close race, I think, unless Emerson did too. And I don't want to jip Spencer over at Emerson. He might have, but I think Robert was like 7. We were like 6, but right in that neighborhood. And it turned out to be a nail biter. And again, simple on the ground voter registration drive could have given him that 3 points. Easy. 2 to 3 points for an early vote operation is very generous. Is conservative. It's conservative. He could have eked it out if he would have made sure that there weren't so many ballots for Bergen to, throw in there last minute. And that's what a big part of what early voting operations do, folks. It prevents the opposition from taking those ballots that you now left on the table. They're low hanging fruit and getting creative with how to get them cast and brought in time. So if you would have went and got them before, then they would have been marked as already solicited. So they would not have been able to go out there and stuff the ballot box. It's the oldest trick in the book, guys. It's the oldest trick in the book. And they tell you it doesn't happen, but it's funny because there was just an indictment in New Jersey not long ago, about 10 months ago or so. Atlantic City, they're stuffing the ballot box like crazy over there in AC. So, and a lot of people got indicted for it. And it's been going on forever. So you got to do this in Atlantic, and you got to do this in Mercer, you got to do this in Morris, and yes, you got to do it in Bergen. Hell, even Union. Like these are the neighborhoods we went through when we saw there were actually Trump. I don't want to say they're rallies. He wasn't there. There were just people there gathering on the side of parts of Route 9 and then up by Parsippany, and they're just like holding signs out on these very dangerous roads. These are not safe roads, guys. This is New Jersey, northern New Jersey. I mean, you take one step out on that road and your roadkill. They'll run you right over. And they're all sitting out there. I'm watching Sikhs. Like these are people, these are like Indians. I saw Muslims out there. I mean, you could see it because from the garments, it was incredible. I don't think I saw a white face in this one U-turn area where there was one of those groups. I don't think I saw one white person. And they're all sitting out there with Trump or bus signs. And Laura and I are like, oh my God, of course this is real. Like, not that I doubted my own polling, but you can see it firsthand. I know this area like the back of my hand. You don't see these people out there, supporting Republican candidates. Like it never happens, ever. So it's notable when you see it. And they just let it go. Again, I just have to point out.
What's your take on the I don't know much about either candidate. So what's sort of a brief rundown on each of the candidates and what's your take on them?
So very vanilla, generic Democrat. That's what it's going to come down to. I think, by the way, Scott Pressler, he brought this up. It's not even a matter of positions. This is solely because the race is a sleeper. And then Democrats typically just have this feeling like they're going to win. And then the Republican candidate is Jack from St. Well, it will be because he's the only one raising any money here. But he's not raising a lot. And in fact, he gets it, which is kind of the saddest part about this. He gets what we were talking about in 24, which is you know what? If you look at states like New Jersey, from Jackson to Union townships, you could go and dig up these votes Like it's one of the most disgruntled, disenfranchised states in the country. There are all of these populations of people that just have completely quit the political process. But if you were to get them to vote, their vote's in the bank. And it's like this well-oiled kind of democratic machine state, and they win because they just know where their votes are. And Jack understands that, like, we need to get more of these votes. That's his, perspective. And that's why he's engaged with people like Pressler. Like, look, help me get these votes. And what happens? Pressler gets attacked. There's all these, videos and about this. He did that. He did this. Like, everybody knew about the Norfolk, Virginia office thing or Virginia Beach thing, and I'm not trying to say it out loud to embarrass the guy, but everyone and their mother knows about what he did in that RNC office years ago. Like, of course, this is not new. And they're bringing it up as if it is. This is about money, folks. The consulting class doesn't want new people like Scott Pressler to get any money. They want to send out mailers, and they want to lose elections and make a fortune doing it. And so these things get drummed up. And I'm not saying this is a defense of Scott. I'm simply saying something else is worth trying since they're losers. I mean, it's right. And Scott did call me and said, look, how did you do that in Michigan? I want to do it in New Jersey. But he can't get the money. It's unbelievable. Because he saw what we did in Michigan. He knows damn well those votes didn't come out of the thin blue air, bro. We just don't talk about it much. But he's identified all those first-time voters because they were just so, like, in love and wanted to go out and vote. Get
what do you think would be if the Republicans to surge in New Jersey? What issues in New Jersey do you think he could run on that could create that possibility?
So New Jersey's always been one of those states where gubernatorial elections are local elections. And I honestly think that property taxes are horrendous in New Jersey. State taxes are horrendous. Taxes actually is a winning issue in New Jersey. But there is this old New Jersey versus new New Jersey thing going on, and he's got to harness that. Like, some of those, like, wedge cultural issues, especially dealing with education, do matter. So if you look at a suburban woman, no offense anybody out there, so don't give me any shit, but you know what I'm talking about, in Rich Marlboro or something like that, up Route 9, a little bit further north, where they all have these lush fescue lawns, right? They have daughters in school too. They got sons in school too. They're not happy with the current state of things, and some of their schools, by the way, are fantastic. So it's not really the quality of education, not with those neighborhoods. It's what they're seeing as the influence on their kids. Drugs are a horrible problem in New Jersey. There was always the pill issue hit everyone everywhere, but heroin is a major problem in the state of New Jersey. By the way, Cory Booker let it happen for years. Nobody says this out loud. When Cory Booker was the mayor of Newark, his boy knew every single big drug dealer in the damn city. All right. There was no bundle of heroin on the corner in Newark that they didn't know about. I mean, this is a very corrupt state, Robert, and drugs are a huge deal, but you're never, you got to go after the non-whites in these neighborhoods that have been inclined, especially younger mothers and working men. You have to go after these people who feel like, they're just like caught in this they're a cog just like caught in this machine. And then again, it's almost a little bit similar to New York, but not quite. You really do. You better get huge turnout in Hasidic neighborhoods, like in Lakewood, for instance. That's what Trump did. He got monstrous votes, but he also won this younger voter. Do you remember when he held that rally in Wildwood, New Jersey? He went, and the attendance at this rally was notable to me because they were so young, and Wildwood is known as a party town, guys. Like, it doesn't matter if you go to school in like Freehold or Wall Township, or which is bougie, or like, Howell or whatever. You're going to go after your prom, and you're all going to get inebriated and hang out in Wildwood. During the summer, you rent like hotel rooms and get inebriated in Wildwood, and they thought Trump was cool as shit. And these people are people who don't vote, Robert. They don't vote. Maybe the version of that voter voted for like Obama in 2008 and never voted again. You know what I mean? Like that's who it is. And they thought Trump was cool, and they came out and supported him when he had his rally there. The cost of living is disgusting. Disgusting. I mean, gas is horrible. Anyone who lives in New Jersey, sound off in the comment chat. You know what I'm talking about. Good luck paying your property taxes. Good luck going to the Pathmark or the ShopRite, grocery stores. They're just, you have to be a professional class person to even want, hope to survive there, which is not, of course, that's not who everyone is. So, you got to motivate them and Jack is the guy to do it because I don't know. He's a good candidate. He's a good retail politician. I mean, I've seen it. I mean, the guy goes in to like the local diner, right? New Jerseyans, right? A little crock and a half over at the Regent. Love it. He goes in there, he shakes hands. They're sitting there having their coffee in the morning. He talks to you. That's how you win New Jersey. It is. It's a Republican, especially. You have to be a person who's talking about local issues. If you become a party who thinks it's their turn, you're cooked, especially if you're a Republican. You're cooked. John Corzine did the same thing, and he lost to Chris Christie. And Chris Christie took the retail approach. And look, he's not exactly the most attractive guy in the world, but he was cool and he knew how to shoot the shit with New Jerseyans. And that's what they like. They want people to think someone gives a shit. I mean, that's what it is. It's just really deep ancestral voting history that is Democratic, and you've got to get past that. And, I just don't know how they let this opportunity go by, because those voters, they're not hard to spot. Like they're findable, and it's like all this time has gone by. And if you knock on their door now, they're going to be like, really? Because what happened to this? What happened to that? They're going to be pissed now. I mean, that's the problem the Republican Party has. Honestly, nobody, and I'm going to go on and on here, but, you take a place like Asbury Park. No voter who is not a traditional Republican voter who voted for Donald Trump, Robert, in Asbury Park or Ocean Grove or some area like that, like lower class shore towns, none of them give two shits about bombing Iran for Israel. None of them give two shits but they care that they just went to the gas station and that shit was very expensive. That's what they care about. It's simple. Honestly, it's not, it's just not hard. It's not hard.
So last question before we get to the super chats. So from your perspective, there is an opportunity because of the gap. The governor's races can be nonpartisan if you find local issues. New Jersey has shown a trend with voters being open to Republican Trumpy brand in the Trump era. The Democratic candidate's more generic and not a locked-in institutional favorite. That there's an opportunity for Republicans, but that so far there's no evidence they're taking advantage of it.
That's it. That's it. That's to summarize. And they're not going to have the national mood in their favor this year. So like Jack was almost swept across the finish line just because of the national mood. That's not going to be there this year, guys. It's not. So you're going to need to work extra hard. This is a workhorse election. You have to outwork whatever Democratic opponent you're going to have, because the country's going to be against you. I mean, this is it. I don't know how much longer we're going to go on with this like charade of, Trump is doing great. We love him. Everyone loves him. No, they don't. I mean, is he underwater 15 points like some polls show? No, but there are a lot of very unhappy Trump voters. And these are always voters who are difficult to get to vote in the first place. To get them to come out in a New Jersey election was going to be even harder.
No doubt. We'll turn to the super chat questions. I'll say my pick for this one is I still think there's a better chance the Republican goes up than down from 14%.
Yeah.
So the official pick will be for the Republic for Mamdani to vote no on Mamdani at about, or yes on Cuomo at 11%, because I think it's more likely to go up than down. And on the Republican for the New Jersey governor at 14%, more likely to go up than down. Though I think Mamdani and the Democrat are the favorites in those two races.
Yeah, I mean, you can just call her Cheryl. Just refer to the last name, because personally, I don't know how to say the first name either. So I've heard Mickey, Mikey, and some weird ass, way to put it. It looks like Mickey to me, but I could be wrong. Let's you want to move on to the other side? I think that's right, though. Yeah, I think that's right.
The super chat questions. Gives you two good previews of two 2025 races. People asked about redistricting. That's for 2026, and we'll get to redistricting once it's done. because otherwise you're just speculating about what a legislature might do, might not do. What does the seat look like? What does it not look like? That, that's not something we want to get into much detail on until it's actually done. And we'll see for those asking about that question. But these are the 2025 races. We'll cover next time the Virginia governor's race and some other ones as part of the Cauchy segment. But a couple of free picks for people that are out there, and remember these are live markets, so you can bet in and out of them. You can with Cauchy, you can put in and say I want to buy if it ever gets down to 10. I want to sell if it ever gets up to 20. That kind of thing. You can like trading. You can trade on the Cauchy markets in live time. So to give some people some edge. But I think we got like 3 super chat questions, and then we can wrap for the Labor Day special. Let people let Richard out to smoke that food and harass his neighbors.
Better not have messed that up or my chicken while I've been doing this. I got a cordon bleu going low and slow. It better be juicy by the time What Are the Odds is over. All right. Thoughts on the Minnesota governor. Okay, here's another personal and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings here, but the Minnesota some in the Minnesota Republican Party do understand. Let me just say they have a grip on what needs to be done. They want their state to be more competitive. Robert, this is I don't want to embarrass anybody, but the committee voted down having me speak at their convention. And literally lost the vote, folks. They said, don't bring him here to tell us that we're doing everything wrong, which, would have been a productive conversation. But there's a Minnesota nice thing going on, like a Wisconsin nice almost kind of thing, only Minnesota's even worse. And they're adversarial to the idea of facing themselves and the problems that they've had. And this idea of this establishment Republican who's a super nice guy, a lawyer, right, Robert, a CPA, right? Even though they may be mostly rhino, I don't want to attack that person. I don't want, and it's like you got to attack them. It's just, you do have to have the conversation that you have no way in hell of winning a statewide race in Minnesota with a Republican like that. That's never going to happen. And I would say more about it, but they voted down, so they don't want me over there. I'm not giving them any advice. You know what I'm saying, Povang? That's it. I can't, and listen, you know me, Robert, I'm not telling you like some of our friends out there who will ask the party for $75,000 to go speak at that convention. I mean, I'm not kidding, folks. Crazy shit. Laura's pay for his travel and I'll tell you what's up. And they just don't want to have that conversation. So I have no delusions here about anyone's chances in a state that needs a lot of work, has a lot of potential, but the people who are doing it are just fine with the status quo and the way things are. And they don't have, they're not built for this shit, guys. All right. I mean, that's it. These things will take big thinkers and big people of action. And they are not that. As nice as they are, they're not. I mean, they proved that the minute they voted down having me go tell them what's up. I mean, that. I don't know. Then go ahead. I don't know. Hire Larry Sabato to tell you how to keep losing the fucking shit. This is where so many Republican states are. And if you live in Minnesota, I'm sorry, because that's been my white whale for years, as Robert knows. I think I could win it. I think it could be won, and they just won't do it. They just won't do it. And it's sad, honestly, because I don't think that I think it's a society, a self-governing society. We're not healthy at all when we just ignore people, large groups of people. That's just bad for the long run. And Minnesota's been ignored for a really long time. I mean, something happened when Mondale won it against Reagan. They just gave up. And I mean, that's it. What are your thoughts, Robert? I think there's no prayer.
I think that it'll take some loss. Can Minnesota have a Republican governor? Absolutely. It has a reformist populist tradition, but it will require the right candidates breaking through, combining the grassroots and with a donor base, crowdfunded donor base that can overcome media bias and institutional interest. And right now, that's tricky in a lot of states.
The handicap is what refer to it as. And right, I mean, actually, Robert, we talked about this in Chattanooga a little bit. You got to get out of the mold. you've got to get out of the mold and start realizing the way we crowdfund the public polling project. And people out there, you're going to have to realize, and I'm not doing this to preach to you, I'm just simply telling you the reality. It's not enough to sit there and just bitch about things. Like, when candidates need your help, they need your help. All right. And otherwise, you're relying on people who hate you to give them the support that they need. It's never going to happen. That's not going to happen. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not preaching you, but that's just the truth. It is. Let's go to John, and somebody else snuck one thing in there, but it's more just a comment, Hey, oh, look at that, Robert, from Chattanooga. It's a big comment that's covering you, though, so let's get rid of it. Hey, from Chattanooga, from my brother and I'm a chemical engineer for the past 35 years. Do you see an admin doing more for manufacturing? I want to start pharma manufacturing company. Tired of money going overseas. U.S. first, not Israel. Woo.
Well, I mean, definitely the Trump absolutely wants to re-onshore pharmaceutical manufacturing. He considers it high value and national security oriented. So, yeah, you're on the right path. And I think that the Trumpian agenda will continue to dominate for the next decade, one way, shape, or form or another. I think it's most likely to occur in the form of a President Vance. But and Vance is even more committed to it, if that's possible, than Trump is, to re-onshoring domestic manufacturing. And pharma is a critical constituent component of that, and in particular to not be as dependent on China and India for pharmaceuticals as we currently are. So I think that's a smart move.
Yeah, this is just a little bit of a comment for you too. The 180 on Operation Warp Speed, and he said, the guy on Local said it was clout. Said Barnes, it's still a good time to ping Pam Bondi about the Brooke Jackson lawsuit. So that's more actually a question, because this is a big deal that Trump did this. Like, this is the first time Trump was like, you know what, maybe Warp Speed wasn't so great after all. And this is huge because, I mean, Robert and I, guys, have been telling him, stop with this shit for a long time. This is not something to tout. We understand it was a huge private-public partnership, the likes of which we haven't seen since like World War II. So, I mean, he gets credit for mobilizing an effort like this, but he also is opening himself up to the criticisms that he has, at least in some part, the responsibility for this like ahistorical tested vaccine to get through the safeguards and then into the arms and ass cheeks of the public and have damaged a lot of people. So I don't know. What do you think about that, buddy? What do you think about it? I will just say, though, John's question real quick. Barnes is right. I think that had Trump been reelected, we would have already seen movement on this. Now he's kind of had forced to be started all over again, but he does and has since COVID seen this as a national security issue. And binders, fillers, even antibiotics, like to rely on the Chinese and others, and Israel and others. Israel's another big one, to rely on them for our needs during a pandemic is a national security threat, and he knows that. So it's huge. Give him time, but I actually know that the president 100% agrees with you and wants to go in that direction. So it's a big task. But what do you think about the Brooke Jackson thing? We'll
see with that. I mean, Robert Kennedy continues to do good work, waiting on Pam Bondi to correct that case. Great political opportunity in my view, but we'll see. I think it will take continued more work in that regard. I was just thinking Minnesota. If Walsh was a Republican, they would have been. I mean, you have 2 public assassinations within a year in that state. The per capita risk of the probability of that was very low. And is it a coincidence? It comes from the guy who says, "I'm friends with school shooters." Right?
It's unbelievable.
If a Republican had said that, they'd be running nonstop, 24/7 on CNN and MSNBC. Look at this. It's another way in which Minnesota, the Twin Cities, is completely at odds with the rest of the state.
Yeah.
But basically, the Twin Cities is about half the vote. The rest of the state is half the vote.
Yeah.
And I think the mistake Republicans are making is trying to run as moderate Twin City suburbanites when they would be better off, having a candidate from outside the Twin Cities, from Duluth or the rural areas, run against the Twin Cities. Say we don't want the Twin Cities to run our state. They're killing our state. They're giving us school shooters, declining manufacturing, unsecure crime, open borders. A Somali who can't even speak English is the next mayor of Minneapolis. Talk about craziness there. I think there's opportunity there, but it's more along those lines.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. At this point, I would tell people, what do you have to lose?
Yeah.
You're going to lose anyway. You know you're going to lose anyway. Find someone from Duluth, which is the one part you've been having a very difficult time cracking up there. Find somebody who's authentic there. Run against the culture of the Twin Cities. And by the way, you just may find, considering Trump's approval rating is stubbornly high with urban non-white men, which is remarkable, right? You may find some people who agree with you in the Twin Cities, and you may just motivate people to vote that otherwise would not have voted. So you have nothing to lose because you're going to lose anyway. Let's get real. It's a 12-point ass kicking heading your way unless you do something different. This guy says, Baris, go smoke your food and harass your neighbors. And whatever you do, don't get those two mixed up. Paul, thanks, brother. Happy Labor Day. All right. As always, Robert, thanks, man. Sportspicks.locals.com. Tell people where to go, what you're doing, what you got planned.
Yeah, so we got the profitable in college football, profitable in Major League Baseball, trying to turn the corner on soccer, profitable so far in politics. So we'll have a bunch of political bets up later this week at sportspicks.locals.com that you can join for free. The subscription rate is like 10 cents a pick, so it's the most affordable, accessible, profitable service out there. If you're just interested in learning about the sports, learning about politics, learning about information intel, you can join for free. So all of that is available as well over at sportspicks.locals.com.
Thanks as always, Robert. Happy Labor Day. Give my best to yours over there, okay?
Happy Labor Day. Thanks, man.
All the best, brother. All right, Robert Barnes, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go to have a great Labor Day, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of it. The link to the public polling project is below, of course. I didn't put the Labor Day thing up there. So whatever from today on is contributed to the public polling project will just be deducted from what the goal is of the new one. I just haven't done it yet. There's a way I want to do it. It's not working. So I'll just lower it. This way it's our way of like moving it over. So let's say somebody donated $1 right now, it'll be $1 less on the total on the Labor Day one that I put up. And you'll be able to see it because the wall is there. So you'll see exactly what I'm doing. All right. The wall is like what is that website? Not Go Send Go, which they probably have a wall too. But what was that other one that I was trying to avoid altogether because they would have shut us down? The original one that hates conservatives, right? And shuts down causes that they don't like. Rasmussen tried it on theirs, in fact, and I think they had an issue. But in any event, it's got the wall up there. You can see anybody who does contribute on whatever day. They can put that they're anonymous, but you could still see what was contributed. So that will be deducted off of the total of what that campaign cost is. You understand? Am I saying that right? I hope so. Thanks as always for watching, guys. Don't forget, Inside the Numbers Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, I'm out. Go enjoy your food and your family, folks. See you soon.